Okay, now I have started the recording. So if you people have any questions so far, we have what you still can't hear me? Hamdan Kareem.
जी सर, अब आ गई आपकी बात, अब आ गई।
Okay. So if you have any questions so far, what we have studied in the last two classes, let me tell you what we have studied so far. We have studied that sometimes you need to use a piece of code repeatedly. Okay? Some code that you need to use repeatedly. Normally, you would paste it everywhere in your program, wherever you need to use it. Functions provide a way to write that code once only, and then call it multiple times in your program. So that basically saves you the effort of copy pasting, number one. Number two, in those multiply pasted portions of code, if you want to change anything, you have to change it at multiple positions. So that basically creates a risk of error. You might forget changing somewhere or make an error changing your code if you are doing it manually repeatedly. So again, functions provide a solution to this, because since you have written your code only once, so if you need to change that code, you need to change at only one place. Okay, so changing something at one place is much less riskier than changing something in tens of places. So that's, the reason why we use functions, one of the reasons why we use functions. And secondly, the second step was, how do we declare and define a function, and how do we call a function? Okay? So in the last class, we saw the general syntax and a couple of examples, particular examples of how we can declare and define a function, and secondly, how we can call that function. Okay, we saw the syntax as well as calling practical examples of those declaring, defining, as well as calling functions. Okay, another thing we studied was, and we will continue from there, how can we pass information to a function when we call it? Okay, so how do we pass information to a function when we call it? What's the technical name for that? In what way can we pass an information to a function? Very good. So we pass, whenever we call a function, we can pass some information to it via arguments. Okay? So the values that we pass in arguments, information are basically values. So yes, arguments are also called parameters. Okay, in our context, function arguments and parameters mean the same thing. So whenever we call a function, we can pass some information in the form of values to it in its arguments, and the function basically will receive those passed values in its arguments, and within the function we can use those arguments to use those values or use that information that was passed to it when calling it. Okay. And similarly, a function based on some information, it can do some calculations and produce a result. Okay. And that result, the function can return that result to the place wherever it was called from. Okay. So the return result again is usually a value. So that value will be returned where the function was called from, and that caller code can use the result of that function in whatever way it wants. Okay, so these are things that we discussed last week and last class, and we'll continue from here in this class. So there is a question, can we call any function in other user-defined functions? Yes, just like you can call functions in main. Similarly, you can call functions in your own functions also. Okay, I told you earlier that you can do anything you can do in main, you can also do it in your own functions. There was another comment, sir, it shows an error, I don't know why. Okay, I think this is a particular example, so I think it's better if you ask me separately. Okay, here we will basically focus on general things in the class. Can we declare two functions at the same time and call it at different places? Yes, yes, you can. What do you mean by at the same time? You can declare two functions, define two functions, f1 and then define another function f2, and you can call it anywhere you want, any of them. Okay. Any other question? No? Okay. So since you guys are not asking any questions, I'll assume the answer of my choice, which means that everything is fine and you guys have no questions. So I'll continue forward. Let me share my screen.
सर आप अपने लेक्चर्स की वीडियो यूट्यूब पर अपलोड कर सकते हैं। एमएस टीम पे जो है वो कभी वीडियो नहीं आ रही, ऑडियो आ रहा है और एक तो लोड ही नहीं हो रहा। प्लीज सर।
Okay, okay. I'll upload them on YouTube and send you guys the link. Can you guys see the screen, this terminal? Okay. So there was another comment. Can you give an example other than int and void? Okay, we'll see this. And how many different types of return types are there? So a return type could be any type in C++. Okay, you know different kind of types in C++. You have integer, character, float, boolean, whatever, and all those types, and there are many other also. Any of these types can be a return type of a function, but the condition is that this function should then return that a value of that type. Remember, how do we choose a return type of function? We choose the return type of function based on the value type, data type of the value that the function is returning. Okay, so the function should return a value of that type. Is it possible for you to deliver this lecture in Urdu? I'm afraid the official instructions are that the medium of instruction is in English, so we'll have to continue in English. You can interrupt me as many times and ask questions as you want. Okay. Can I share the source codes? Yes, of course I can. Whatever I type here, I will send it to you or upload it on CMS. It's better, I think. Okay. So what else? Yeah, so I have shared the screen with you. Let's go and open up that function func03. Here we go. So here we have three functions that we have defined. Let me make it full screen. Yes, so I have defined three functions. The first one is from line 6 to 9. Okay, by complicated shape. And the second one is f2. Okay, and the third one is num add. Okay, num underscore add. Three functions. The first two functions, they are not returning anything. You see, they are not returning any value. They're just printing it. So their return type is void. Okay. I told you in the last class that void is a keyword in C++ and it means nothing. Okay? So there are certain positions where when you mean nothing, you can write void. So here we have to mention the syntax asks us that every function should have a return type, and we have to mention the return type of this function. The return type depends on the value that the function is returning. Since here this function is not returning anything, so we can't specify any return type except void, okay? Because void means nothing. It's returning nothing, so we say its return type is void. Similarly, this function f2, it does not take any argument, okay? So again, if a function it is not taking any arguments, we can either leave the parenthesis empty, like we have done for my complicated shape on line number 6. Okay? That's one way of saying that this function takes no argument. Or like we have done in f2 on line number 11, we can say that its arguments are void. Okay, void again here means nothing. There are no arguments to the function f2. In contrast, the third function on line number 18, numadd, it has 2 arguments. Okay, so when we define a function, we give the arguments separated by comma. If there are multiple arguments, they are separated by the comma operator. And when giving the arguments, we have to mention the type and the name that we want to give to that argument, okay, in the definition of the function. So here numadd has 2 arguments. The first argument is of type integer, and we have named it num1. The second argument after the comma again is of type integer, and we have named it num2. And what this function is doing, it is adding its 2 arguments num1 and num2 and storing the result in a variable of type int called sum. Then it's returning the sum. Again, returning sum means sum will be evaluated and the value of sum will be returned. Okay, so this value is of type int that we are returning, so that's why the return type of this function is an integer. Okay, so that's how you can define functions. Arguments, as many arguments as you like, as you need, and then whatever you want to do with those arguments, and in the end you can return a value, and the data type of that value should be the return type of your function. Okay? Here it's an integer. That's a recap of what we did in the last class. Any questions? Let me go to the chat. Mid-marks, yes, I'll do it this week. Is it necessary for a program to have an int main function? Yes. It is necessary. The C++ standard requires that every C++ program should have a function called main. Its return type should be int. It can have 0 or a couple of arguments. We'll see later what arguments main can have, but for the moment we are using the syntax that main has no arguments. Okay, but in any case, every C++ program should have the function main, because the execution of a C++ program starts from the function main. Okay, so if there is no main in your program, the compiler would not know where to start executing the program from. Okay, so every function C++ program should have main. Is string main possible? No. The standard says the return type of main should be int. Okay, it's only int main that is possible. We'll talk about arguments of main sometime later in the course. Right now, assume that main we are giving no arguments to main. Why have written void in int argument of second function? Yeah, void means nothing. Okay, so when you have no arguments, either you can leave the parenthesis empty or you can write void between the parentheses. Void means nothing, it has no arguments. What is the purpose of using arguments? That's a very good question. I would like you guys to answer this question. What is the purpose of using arguments? Because we have discussed it, I think, at the start of this lecture. What is the purpose of using arguments? What can we do with arguments? Why do we need to use them? To give information about it. What does it mean? Give some information to the function, give some values to the function. Okay, so give some, like let's say you have this add function. You will not always be adding the same numbers. Okay? Every time you call the add function, you might want to add different numbers. Okay, so for that we need arguments, because every time we call a function, we should able to give it different numbers which it should add and give us the result. Okay, so that's why, and we need to have arguments so that every time we could call a function, we could pass it different values, different functions. And every time those instructions are executed, they execute on a different values. Okay, so every time we call a function, we give it different values, and the same code is executed on different values for functions of the same function. Sorry. Okay, the same function is executed on different values. Every time we use those instructions, we give them different values. Okay. Let's say you have a instructions of function, you can call it like a recipe, okay? A series of steps that you have to do in the function, the instruction that it executes. So let's say you have a recipe for making cake. It's a generic recipe. It can make any cake, but every time you use this recipe, you give it different ingredients. Sometimes you make a chocolate cake, so you give it chocolate, it gives you the same recipe is executed and it gives you a chocolate cake. And sometimes you want to make a banana cake, you give it bananas and the same instruction would be executed and it would make you a banana cake. Okay? So similarly, every time you want to use this recipe, you give it different ingredients and it would execute the same series of steps on those ingredients and would give you a different return cake. Similarly, in functions, the code in function is a series of instructions. Every time we call that function, we give it different values and it executes the same steps over different values and it gives us a different result every time. Okay. Chocolate and banana would have different types. Yeah, but you can call it an ingredient. The type is ingredient and it could be chocolate or banana. Okay. Chocolate and banana are values for those that type ingredient. Okay, so I hope it's clear why do we need arguments to a function. Because if you want to do something different in that function, like on a different values, you need to have arguments. Otherwise, you can't give different values to your function. Okay. The argument list is a list of variables that hold values being passed to the function. Very good. Okay, so I think I hope it's clear to the majority why do we need function arguments. So what should we do now? Okay, yeah, in the last class, is it still fluctuating? Is it my voice clear or it's like breaking up for you guys? Noise, okay. Okay, so it's clear for some. So maybe there is some internet issue in some parts. Okay. Yeah, so I was saying that one thing that we had discussed was the execution flow. What happens on to the execution flow when we call a function. Okay, so Let me go to the terminal and ask you guys. Let's say I have this function numadd which goes from line 18 to line 23. So in line 32 and 36 and 40, I call numadd. So what will happen to the execution flow when it starts from main, continues linearly line by line, and it arrives at line 32, and we call numadd. What would happen to the execution flow? Where will it go? Will it go to line 33, 34, or will it go somewhere else? Why is the data type int in main functions? Forget about main right now, okay? Because main is a special function. We'll discuss questions related to main at the end of the course. Right now, concentrate on the questions that I am asking. Okay, so I hope it's clear to everybody that when I call main on line 32, the calling function makes the execution flow jump to the body of the function. Okay, so the body of the function in our case is starting on line 18. So the execution flow will jump to line 18 and it will start executing the body of the function. Okay, so it will continue until it reaches the end of the function, and then after it reaches the end of the function, where will it go? After finishing the execution of the function, after reaching the end of the function, where will the control flow or the execution flow go? Back to line 32. Are you sure that it will go to line 32 and not to line, let's say, 24 or line 25 or line 40 or line 36? Line 32 is the correct answer, sir. It will go wherever the function was called and continue because the statement where the function was called is not finished yet. So it will go back to wherever it was called from and then finish that statement and then move forward. Okay, so it will go back to line 32 and continue its execution forward from there. So I hear noise. I'll mute you. Number no share. So I muted you. You can always raise a hand if you want to talk. So okay, so we have called numadd in line 32. We jump to the body of the function. Line 18, we finished it, executed the body one by one, and then we came back to line 32. We'll finish executing line 32 because the assignment statement has not still finished. So after the value that we got from the function, we will assign it to Z, and then we would continue executing our program forward. So after line 32, we'll go to line 33, there is nothing. Line 34, it will print the value. And then on line 36, again, we are calling numadd in an assignment statement. Okay, so what will happen to the control flow now at line 36? When the control flow reaches line 36 and it executes the call to numadd, what will happen to the execution flow? There are no answers. It will go to line 18 again. Okay, it will line 18 again to the body of the function. Whenever we call a function, it will always go to the body of the function and start executing the body of the function. Okay, so we called it again, so it will again go to line 18, execute it till the end, and then go back to where it was called from. This time it was called not from line 32, but from line 36. So this time it will go back to line 36. Okay, so the new result will not be returned to line 32, but to line 36. It will be used in the line 36. It will be assigned to Z, and we will move forward after line 36. We will continue until we reach line 40, where again the function is called again, and it will again jump to line 18 to the body of the function, execute the body, reach till end, and then return back to line 40. Okay, so the return value is always returned to the location wherever the function was called from. Okay, so in all these assignment statements, we are calling the function. So every result sum is returned to the location where this function was called each time, and that value then is used in that statement. Okay. Can you repeat the execution of program line by line again? I just did, so I'm afraid we'll have to re-listen to the video for this. But the key thing is, the one thing that you want to remember is that whenever you call a function, it will always, the execution flow will always jump to the body of the function, to the start of the function. It will start executing the body of the function until the end, and then after finishing the body of the function, it will return back to wherever it was called from. Okay. So that's the one thing that you want to remember. So let me see, there's a comment, we could have got the same result without the return statement at line 22. Let me see, line 22. We could now the same as line 22. No. The return statement is mandatory. You have to write return and the value that you want to return. Otherwise, you will have problems. Okay. So whenever you want to return a value from a function, it's mandatory that you write return and after space the value that you want to return. I have internet speed of 36 Mbps, but your sound is fluctuating. I think there must be some issue because it is reaching fine to others, so there must be some issue. And some is equal to a plus b, some is. Your voice is fluctuating and the screen got stuck. Okay, so let me see what I can do. What I can do is that instead of Wi-Fi, I can put this Ethernet cable in my laptop and see if situation improves. So now I'm connected to Ethernet, and I'm afraid I can't do better than this. So if it is still fluctuating, I'm afraid you will have to bear with me and how should I say, either listen to the video again or contact me later with your queries. So you have posted this code without the return statement. It is problematic. Let me show you what will happen. You see here I have like okay. So if I don't return it, what will happen now? function returned 123, 7, and so what did I pass? func2 7. Okay, it seems to be working, but let us do something else. It should not work. Hmm. Hmm. Let me Mhm. Okay, I must admit that you have got me stuck here. Normally, it should not be working. Let's see, we should do something else. Okay, so let's say I wanted to return sum and not sum2. Okay, I've changed this property. So you see, I wanted to return sum, but now it's returning sum2. Okay, the sum values were, I haven't changed it, so it should be 123, 7, and this one. And what it's returning me is this. Okay? So, but I wanted to return sum. So what I will do is that I will go back and I will uncomment this statement. And I will compile it again, and now whatever I do, it always returns me sum. See, I hope you are convinced that following the standard is always a better idea than relying on something that you observe to be correct, but is not mandated by the standard. Sometimes, if it's not according to standard, sometimes things might work, but it will eventually break down. So you should always follow the standard. The standard says that you should always return the return value explicitly by writing the return statement. Okay. Without the return statement, if you were getting the return value, it was only a fluke, okay? And ultimately it broke down. So, Saleh, what did you didn't understand the Okay, the changes that I made were that what Usman was saying, that he was basically saying that we do not need this to write this return value. Okay, so did you see the change that I made? I have commented the return statement. Okay, so now sometimes without this return statement, sometimes it does return the value of sum. Okay, the value of sum was being returned without the return statement. That's why Usman said that we did not read to use the return statement. So you see, it is being returned, the value. The value of sum is being returned without the return statement. So what I was highlighting was that this is non-standard behavior. The standard says that if you want to return something, you have to explicitly use the return statement and return that value through the return statement. And if it is happening without the return statement, then this behavior is unreliable. For example, if I introduce this statement here in between my code somewhere, and now I've still commented the sum return statement. Okay, so if I execute, I wanted to return the sum, okay, but if I execute this statement now, it is not returning me the value of sum. Okay, the value of sum was this 123.7, 28.788, and what I'm getting here is 189.73, etc., which is basically the value of sum 2. Okay, we don't want this behavior. We want our function to always return sum. That's why we need to use the return statement explicitly. Okay, now I have uncommented the return statement and we are returning the value of sum using that return statement. So here, even after the presence of sum2, my function is always returning me the value of sum. Okay, that's why you should always use the return statement to return any value from the function, because that's the way that the standard recommends you to. Okay, no, I understand. You guys don't need to get frustrated. It happens. The internet infrastructure in our country is not reliable, so it is like an issue which is beyond our control. Okay, so if there is some issue that is beyond our control, then there is very little that we can do about it. Okay, so in this case, I'm afraid you'll have to bear with me and listen to this video either later or contact me sometime during my office hours next week to get your queries answered. Or otherwise, you can also read the book and see if you understand the chapters in the book and come up with your questions later. Office hours, I think I've written them in the syllabus. It's like, I think it's Monday, Tuesday from 9 to 10 in the morning. No, sorry, not Monday, Tuesday. Tuesday, Wednesday, 9 to 10. So I'll be present on MS Teams, so you guys can contact me here. So I hope I've answered the questions that you guys had so far. And right now, how much time do we have? We have very little time. So what I can do is that in this little time that we have, I can perhaps clarify the distinction between declaring a function and defining a function. Okay. So right now, these functions, I'll again remove these extra lines so that our functions become simpler. So right now, all these functions, we have defined them above main, declared and defined them. I told you that this was declaration and definition. So to clear out the distinction between declaration and definition, what I will do is that I would move these functions after the main. I'll remove them from here and I'll paste them after main. So here, they are still in the same file, but before they were above main, and right now they are after the main. Okay, so let's see what happens when I compile them. G++ 2.c. Oops. You see, there's an error. What does it say? The error says this file number, line number, etc. num_add was not declared in this scope. Scope is again something that we'll study in the next few weeks, but for the moment, it says file number this, func02.cpp, line number 12. So let's go and see what's on line number 12. Why is the compiler not happy? Line number 12 we are calling num_add. Okay, so normally it should jump to the body of num_add. Where is num_add? Num_add is here. Okay? So it should go here and execute the function. But instead, the compiler is not happy and it says that this num_add function was not declared in this scope. What does it mean and why are we getting this error? Anybody wants to take a guess? Remember, whenever we want to introduce something new in our program, before using something new in our program, we have to introduce it in our program. Okay, so we are using the function num_add in line number 12. Okay, now before using the function, we have to introduce it, and introduction means what do we have to do? Introducing something new in our program, what does it mean? We should declare it. Okay, declaration means that introduce something new in our program, because you need to tell your program what is this thing. Is it a variable? Is it a function? What is its type? Okay, how much size does it need in memory, etc. We have to introduce it to the program by declaring it. So when we use the function num_add in the main on line 12, we still have not declared it. Like the compiler, when it reaches line number 12, you see the compiler starts from the top, include using namespace, int main, it arrives at line 12 and it sees num_add. And it says, what's num_add? I have read all this file from the beginning until this point, line 12, and I have seen nothing which is called num_add. So what is num_add? Okay, so it gives you an error that num_add is something that is not declared. Okay? So because we have moved the declaration definitions here, it did not get a chance to be acquainted with num_add. Okay, so it doesn't know what num_add is. So what we can do is we can declare num_add before main so that the compiler know what num_add is. What does it mean? So here I told you that this was declaration as well as definition. So what does a simple declaration look like? I take it here and I go and put it here. Nope. So a declaration of a function looks like this. Let's say it's the return type, func name, that is close and semicolon. Okay, so this is how a declaration, the general syntax of declaring a function. Okay. You see what is missing compared to definition? Body. Very good. Okay. Function declaration does not have a function's body. And also we are not required to give the name of the variables arguments inside the declaration. You can give it, but it's not required. Okay. So the function, so I think I should correct it here. So instead of naming args, I should name types. So the function declaration basically consists of the return type, the function name, opening parenthesis, the type of the first argument, comma, type of the second argument, parenthesis closed and semicolon. This is a function declaration. It does not have a function body. Okay? Declaration do not have function bodies. Definitions have function bodies. Okay. So now that I have declared this function before using it, so let's see what happens now to the compiler. You see, it's happy. It's happy, it has compiled and it has run our fantastic program. Okay. So whenever you want to use a function, you have to first declare it. You are not required to define it anywhere before using. You can define it even after the use, but you have to declare it before the use, at least declare. So what we were doing previously were that we were declaring as well as defining the function before its use, so it was not giving us any problem. Okay, but in C and C++ we can separate the declaration from the definition. The declaration has to be before the use. Okay? Otherwise, you will get problems with the compiler. The definition could be anywhere, before, after, etc., etc. Okay. So what happened here was the compiler basically starts reading this file, include using, it's a something called numadd, which is a function. It has a return type of int. It takes 2 arguments of type int. Okay, it's happy now. It knows what numadd is. It knows that numadd is a function and its return type as well as its argument. It goes forward, it arrives here at line number 12, now line number 14 perhaps. 16 and it says that you're calling numadd. Okay, now it knows what numadd is. You are calling numadd, you are calling it correctly, so it poses no problem and continues forward, and ultimately it will also find the definition of numadd. So all is well, nothing is missing, so this time it didn't complain. Okay, so function declaration and definition are 2 separate things. We can do it together or separately, but one thing is sure, that the standard requires you to declare the function before its use. And declaration contains the name of the function, its return type, and the types of its arguments. The definition, by the way, contains the body also. Okay? If there is no definition, the compiler will not know what should this function do. Okay, so you have to provide the definition somewhere in your program It could be anywhere. Okay, so that's the distinction between a declaration of a function and its definition. Is it clear? Can we call C function in C++? Yes, but it's a topic that we will not be touching now. Can we define the function outside the function like inside int main? Can we define the function outside the function? What does it mean? Can we define the function outside the function like inside int main? Okay, I don't think I understand this statement completely correctly. Any other question anybody has? It would make the concept redundant. Again, I don't understand this comment as well. Today you people are talking in language that seems too complicated for me. Any other question? Yeah, okay. If you guys want to leave, you guys can leave. But in the next, by the way, in this class, I have revised a couple of times, so we have gotten a little slow. So I wish you guys understand whatever we have studied until this class on the weekend, revise, practice, and try to explore these concepts. In the next class, we would move forward slightly. Okay. So if you guys want to leave right now, you can leave, but mark your attendance, your name as well as your ID. Don't write your ID on your name only. Okay, so practice. That's one formula for becoming good in programming, and we'll meet next Monday. I will try to share these codes with you on LMS. Right? So thank you very much, and I'll stop the recording now.